Some years ago, I had an incredible opportunity. I went on tour with Marc Anthony as his tour photographer. He was part of a triple headlining tour called Gigantes that also included Chayanne and Marco Antonio Solis. I had an all-access badge that allowed me to go anywhere, backstage, on stage, and anywhere that Marc went. The Gigantes tour started in Miami and crisscrossed its way to more than a dozen cities in the US. Then we stopped in a few countries in Latin America, and finally traversed through South America and ended the tour in Caracas, Venezuela. Show days always started with a soundcheck at the venue. I would hang out on stage while the singers and band worked. This was also a time for me to scope out the stadium for places to shoot from. It's mind-blowing how quickly a full stage goes up and comes back down for every show. The backstage always looks the same in just about every venue. It's a lot of concrete and a lot of equipment, but the stadiums themselves can be pretty standout. The one in Buenos Aires was just massive. In Antofagasta, Chile, we played by an old abandoned silver mine. Quito was nestled in the mountains. The altitude was so high that there were oxygen tanks backstage during the show for the performers. Movistar Arena in Santiago had a beautiful ceiling, and San Jose had a brand spanking new soccer stadium. After soundcheck, we'd head back to the hotel. The band and I would arrive back to the stadium 2 hours before the show. The band members were awesome. Some of them had been with Marc for 10, 15, even 20 years. Since they traveled and toured together for so long, watching them was like watching a big family. They were all really fun and great to be around. They were kind of my adopted family on the road, especially Alex, one of the singers. Eventually, a set list would be shared that night for Marc, as well as who performed first, second, and third. Each performer had about 45 to 60 minutes, and the whole show was about 3 hours. When Marc arrived at the venue, I usually followed him around everywhere, snapping photos of him in his dressing room or just hanging around backstage. 10 minutes before the show, the band would usually head from the dressing room to the back of the stage. As the lights went out, the crowds would go bananas. The band went on stage, started playing the intro, and I would follow Marc to his riser for his entrance. One of my favorite places to shoot from was right on stage by the band. From this point of view, I had a great view of Marc in front of me with the massive crowds behind him. All three sets were so different. Marc had no dancers, no pyrotechnics, no flashy video animations. The man was all voice and passion. Chayanne's set was different. He had amazing dancers and sexy choreography. His whole show was just hot. Marco Antonio Solis pretty much has legend status in Latin music. His show had big hits from his really long career. The show always ended with all three of the guys coming out together on stage. When this happened, the crowd would just flip out. After a few final numbers together, they'd head back to the top of the stage, give a final wave, and be lowered back down the risers. It was such a privilege to watch these three ginormous figures in Latin music perform. After each night, I would have anywhere between 700 to 1,000 photos to parse through and make selections, edit colors, and resize for social media, etc. I honestly think I have more photos of Marc Anthony than I do of myself. You know, in the US, the fans loved Marc, Chayanne, and Marco. But in Latin America, people were beyond obsessed. So many people brought huge signs and people threw all sorts of gifts on stage. That love was definitely returned with gratitude. After one show, I was with the band in the caravan of cars, leaving the venue back to the hotel. A huge mob of fans thought Marc was in one of our cars and started banging on our vehicle, trying to get a glimpse. We were trapped for what seemed like forever until eventually cops on horses had to break up the mob. So imagine all of that crazy fan energy just coming at you. When I was photographing on stage, I could just feel that energy while I was up there. So I can't even imagine what it's like to be the actual talent. Photographing that tour was probably as close to being a rock star as I'll ever get. The shows were amazing, but in reality, more time was spent traveling than anything else. The band and crew were such a huge group that we would arrive for domestic flights anywhere between 2 to 3 hours early. And then once we landed, we would have to go through immigration and customs and get our luggage and then travel together as a group to the hotel. So a 2 to 3 hour flight could very easily become a full entire day's worth of traveling. Sometimes we'd be in a city for 3 days and sometimes we'd be there for a week. I got to see so many countries that I'd never seen before. When you're dealing with so much travel, it can really wear you out. Despite that, I try to get out and see as many places as possible. A friend of mine was looking for photography work and he found this random Craigslist posting for a photographer that could travel. So he applied for the job, went in for the interview, and realized it was Marc Anthony Productions. They really liked him, but he didn't hear anything from them for a while. So he started looking for some other work and eventually he found another job. And of course, as luck would have it, Marc Anthony Productions called him and said, you know what, we're ready for you. So of course he couldn't go and he posted on his Facebook to see if anybody else was interested in touring. So I said, of course, yes. I applied for the job and went in for the interview, and in less than 2 weeks, I was on the road. It's really random how I found this job. When I first met Marc, I told him this was my first time doing a tour or anything like this, and he said, buckle up because it was gonna be a wild ride. And for sure it was. I got to travel the world, go to big events and big parties, and I got to meet a lot of great people. It was a fun time and I would love to do it all over again. So if anybody needs a tour photographer, I'm your man. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.